What's up? So, welcome to Journey in the Self. I'm Zara. And as the title is Journey in the Self, our objective is to unpeel the layers that veil us from attaining knowledge of our true self. And some of those layers have to do with the external environment that distracts us, that redirects our focus, can affect our moods, capture our attention, and derail us from our paths. Some of the things that we deal with, in addition to the issues that we have to face internally, battling with our lower self and embarking on our path to ascension, we also have to deal with external distractions. And those things come in the form of the media, which we've talked about before. One of those we talked about just last time, where we talked about how the recording industry influences behavior in such a way that it compels people to engage in criminal activity to support the prison industry. But there's always, some things going on in terms of the influence and behavior, and media is one of the principal mediums for influencing behavior. When all of the brothers here, including Brother Jamal, when we all met, we were in the midst of a period of Black awakening. The Black consciousness had been on the increase back in the 80s, and there was the Afrocentric movement coming through the publishing of African-centered books, awakening the knowledge that had been hidden from us in terms of our history. And that was also preceded by the Black Power movement, which had been quashed by the intelligence community through their COINTELPRO operation. Ostensibly, COINTELPRO has been ended, but we all know that intelligence programs don't end. They just get renamed. And so we are under no illusion that the attack on our community has ended. Okay, and so one of the things that we're going to discuss, and just to go back for a minute, the reason I brought up the Black consciousness movement is that as we became more aware of our history, we developed a term of basically being conscious or being awakened or woke, right? And so that term ended up being something that signified the awakening of consciousness of Black people who have become more aware of their history and aware of the things that have been going on around us, the way that the enemy has developed strategies to undermine our community. And so when we came up with that term, conscious or woke, that was what we referred to. But now we see that term has been co-opted by different forces, and now that term has, for some, a negative connotation, and certainly not the original connotation that was intended. So, with us to discuss that, in we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about how the term co-opted, woke has been co-opted, and we're going to talk about, if we have time, the move to feminize Black men, also prominently being done in the media. So, with us to discuss both of those topics, I have Brother Stenu Brown, who is the co-author of the book, Choosing to See, a Framework for Equity in the Math Classroom, and Brother Asar Martin, who has created a program called Ask Me Where It Hurts, that endeavors to help people to overcome the effects of childhood trauma. So welcome to the show, brothers. I'm looking forward to talking to you and get both of your perspectives on the topic. Brother Stenu, you've been a prominent member of the Coalition Against Black Exploitation in Film. What are your thoughts on what I discussed in terms of the co-option of the term woke?
Well, first of all, thank you, Brother Asar, for Brother Asar, my apologies, for having us on your show, me and Brother Asar on your show. I'd like to start with the fact that, woke is a term that's been a part of our language for a long, long time. I was listening to a radio show put on actually by a European radio host where he played a song by the blues artist Leadbelly, who had written a song about the Scottsboro Boys, who were a group of young Black men who were falsely accused of raping 2 European women and were sentenced to death. And it was a huge media case in the day. And so Leadbelly wrote this song back in the 30s. And at the end of the song, the last thing he says is "Stay woke." And Tom Hartman played the song on his radio program, so I heard it with my own ears, right? So it's a term that's been in our kind of language and culture for years, and like you said, it has meant being conscious, being an empathetic human being, looking out for the needs of other people, addressing people in the way that they want to be addressed, calling them by the name that they want to be called by, being accurate and honest about our history and our culture, regardless of who gets upset. The truth is the truth, right? And so basically, in my opinion, this attack on wokeness is really an attack on Blackness. So when I hear white supremacists like the Cro-Magnon mayor, governor of Florida, use the term woke, I just replace it with the word Black, right? So every time he says woke, what he really means is Black, right? So that's how I look at it.
Brother Asar?
Like Brother Asanu, man, I want to express my appreciation, bro, for you providing this platform and giving us an opportunity to express our opinions from our knowledge base and skill sets. So with that being said, so-called America or the United Snakes, they have a history of just going in and usurping and capitalizing on our creations. Everything that we come up with, they figure out a way to go in and demonize it. They denature it and use it for themselves or use it as an attack method against us. The term woke is an urban colloquial, actually like the brother already referenced, in the 30s and 40s. It was first coined during that movement. When I say movement, we're talking about the 30s and 40s and 50s, where European elites, they recognized the genius of the Black community. And I'm just going to kind of pathologize it from a historical perspective. Isabel Wilkerson, she has a book called The Warmth of the Suns. She has several bodies of work, but that's the one that brought me to what she was capable of doing. And she talks about the migration from the South to the North. So just the terrorism that our brothers and sisters were experiencing during that time, they were looking to evade that by moving northward. Chicago, Ohio, New York, and that's when the Industrial Revolution came about. Now, why is that important? The European recognized that the genius that was coming out of our Blackness, they had to make sure that they redirected. So like when you look at the Harlem Renaissance, they had to make sure that they steered all of that Black genius towards the entertainment, toward the arts, as opposed to the sciences. They didn't want us to be engineers. They didn't want us to be mathematicians. They didn't want us to be scientists or doctors. So they steered us towards the arts and entertainment. So that became Motown. That became the Jazz Renaissance in New York. And that's where the term became a foundational statement regarding our consciousness as it relates to, well, what's your position on what's going on with us socially? What's your position regarding how we're treated? What word are we going to describe when we come to this awakening? And it was coined. We're now woke. So the European, as they always do, they recognize that, okay, this term is important to them. So we have to take anything that becomes a symbol of importance, remove it, we're going to reframe it, redescribe it, and reinsert it back into the community. So again, as the brother already referenced with Lead Belly, the 30s and 40s, that's when the urban colloquial became a term of endearment and a term of intelligence regarding where our consciousness was. So they have to set about destruction when we start doing anything that's self-determining and self-empowering. They have taken that word and removed the power from it as it applies to us. So that's kind of my position on it.
Absolutely. And both of you brothers brought up some salient points. One of the things that I've noticed, and I agree, that the term has been basically used as a colloquial term for anti-Black, right? When they say woke, and it is typically used when reference is made to revelations about Black history, is used to attack the accuracy of history being taught in schools. I believe it's used now in reference to that. What's that term that was used that was, I guess, distorted with the in the colleges, Brother Steny?
The critical race theory?
Critical race theory, yeah. So it's been used in a similar manner. So even critical race theory is being couched in the woke, term. So anything that is revealing hidden history, particularly as it pertains to our people, and also reveals the mistreatment of our people, is being attacked as part of the woke agenda. You care to expound upon that, Brother Steny?
Yeah, so, I actually looked at the language of the Stop Woke Act, right? Because the one thing that none of these crackers can do is define what they mean by woke, right? And so I chose to kind of look at this legislation to see if I could pull from it what woke might mean, right? So the legislation talks about unlawful employment practices, and it says subjecting any individual as a condition of employment membership certification, licensing, credentialing, or passing an examination, to training, instruction, or any other required activity that espouses, promotes, advances, inculcates, or compels an individual to believe any of the following concepts constitutes discrimination based on race, color, sex, or national origin under this section. And I want to go through, there's 8 different things that they, activities that they bring up. So let's go through them one by one, and you know, maybe we can deconstruct them. So the first one is, so again, this is something that if they compel somebody to believe this concept, members of one race, color, sex, or national origin are morally superior to members of another race, color, sex, or national origin. Now, who's taught that? For centuries, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Who has taught that, right? Okay. This is number 2. An individual by origin of his race, by his or her race, color, sex, or national origin is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. Again, we know, living under a system of what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing teaches us, that the definition of white supremacy is this fight for white genetic survival on a planet where white people are numerically minority and genetically recessive, okay? So they are the ones who have promoted, you know, it's nothing that, you know, we have had to invent or create. We can just look at the actual record to say that, yes, there is a group of people that have declared themselves by virtue of their race, color, sex, national origin, or ethnicity as being inherently racist, right? Number 3, an individual's moral character or status as either privileged or oppressed is necessarily determined by his or her race, color, sex, or national origin. Again, you know, it's interesting. So what they're trying to do here is deny the reality of the world that we're living in, right? Because yes, someone does get privilege in this society determined by their race, color, sex, or national origin. Anybody who, again, see, these are things we can quantify, right? We can show data to show that this is the actual truth. Number 4, members of one race, color, sex, or national origin cannot and should not attempt to treat others without respect to race, color, sex, or national origin. Well, then stop treating other people with respect to their race, sex, or national, right? You know, are we making up the reality of the police relationship between, you know, the police departments and communities of color? Is that something we're making up, right? You know, so again, number 5, an individual by virtue of his or her race, color, sex, or national origin bears responsibility for or should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment because of actions committed in the past by other members of the same race, color, sex, or national origin, right? Now, you know what this is about? This is straight up about reparations, right? They don't want to be held responsible for what they've done to people of color in this country, right?
Right.
Number 7, an individual by virtue of his or her race, color, sex, or national origin bears personal responsibility for and must feel guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress because of actions in which the individual played no part committed in the past by other members of the same race, color, sex, or national origin. Now, we would be happy if white supremacists felt guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress because of actions that they've done against people of color, but they don't, right? They don't feel anything, and they don't want to be reminded of it, right?
That's right.
So that's what that's about. And number 8 is the final one. Such virtues as merit, excellence, hard work, fairness, neutrality, objectivity, and racial color blindness are racist or sexist or were created by members of a particular race, color, sex, or national origin to oppress members of another race, color, sex, or national origin. Again, how do we measure merit, excellence, hard work, fairness, neutrality, objectivity? They're all constructs created by the dominant class. What counts as intelligence, right? What counts as merit, right? You know, the Trump family, right, who stumbled their way into success simply because they were members of the Lucky Sperm Club, right? Or, you know, people who actually worked hard to get what they got, right? So, you know, I just wanted to kind of put that out there and put it in perspective so we know exactly how it is they're framing this issue and how they're trying to use it against us. Right?
And
Outstanding.
as just to basically nail that point home, a manifestation of that is something that just happened just last week. It says Starbucks was ordered to pay over $25 million to a white former manager who claimed racial discrimination, claiming that she was fired because she was white.
Yep.
And she won, and this whole thing ended up coming to the attention because there were two brothers who were in the Starbucks awaiting a business meeting, and they were accused of trespassing, even though people typically meet there for business meetings. People sit in Starbucks to do their homework, do the internet, job search, and they're never accused of trespassing. No recompense was given to the brothers for being falsely accused, but the white woman gets $25.6 million in settlement money, including punitive and compensatory damages, because it's alleged that she was discriminated against because she was white. And so we see basically, you know, as the manifestation of what Brother Astenu said, well, instead of feeling guilt, they're blaming the victim and turning the tables on us for even bringing it up and even seeking any kind of recompense for what the atrocities has been enacted upon us. Brother Saul?
So we can come up with example after example, and one that I want to reference really quickly here is there's a show called The Hill. It's an online news broadcast show, and the sister was interviewing this woman by the name of Bethany Mandel. She's written a book titled Stolen Youth, where she has several chapters on the term woke. So during the interview, the sister asked her, well, okay, well, what does that word mean? How do you define that word? And the woman, a white woman, it's like, well, you know, I don't really want to get into it right now. We don't have enough time. And the sister was like, no, we have plenty of time. What is your definition of the word woke? This woman, after having written a book, could not explain in her own words what that term means. She became so flustered that it was almost it was an absolute embarrassment, okay? But the irony was, after the show, maybe a week later, she criticized the host for not giving her a proper venue to be able to express her ideology through her book, and blamed the host for her inability to express her own opinion regarding a book that she wrote regarding the term woke. Another point is, this woman that sued Starbucks, she's in a recent line of white girls, these Karens, because there was a Karen that sued and I don't like the referencing unless I can give the specifics of it, but she sued a university here in California because she felt like affirmative action prevented her from getting into top-notch classes here in the UC system. I see you may be able to recall the specifics of that, but I can't recall her name. But she was attacking affirmative action based upon a quota system that allowed Black people to get into school because of the oppression that we've experienced regarding the availability to have certain things, access to education, access to certain jobs, certain corporations be able to have elevated positions. So they're trying to slowly dismantle all of the advantage, as small as they are, that we've been given to be able to have a sense of fairness. And in my opinion, it's a war of attrition. They come at us through every major institution that literally governs this planet, through religion, entertainment, politics, law, employment. All the things that we've been given, hard-fought gratuities that we've been given, are slowly being dismantled as it applies to this war of attrition that's being waged against us. So the brother referenced, how do you define IQ? Well, that was a French, what was this catch, man? Let me, if I can recall really quickly. It was an IQ test that was specifically designed to elevate one ethnic group over another. But when they actually pulled back the layers, a French psychologist, Alfred Binet, okay, he was the one that created this construct called IQ. And when they really started to apply it to their kids, to white children, they were on the bottom level regarding the outcomes of this actual test. So the things that they create to elevate themselves, when you really look at it with a scientific lens, a psychoanalytical lens, they do not measure up to how they're projecting themselves as being in a place of superiority, physically and intellectually. So again, this is all a part of the genocidal efforts they've been waging across the African diaspora throughout the world. So if we don't wake up and dismiss our little petty differences, whether it's religion, whether it's whatever, wherever you come from, if you're not able to insert yourself and see yourself through the African diaspora, that lens, then this war of attrition will continue and they will win. So that's my position on it.
Yeah, what was it that Brother Malcolm said? They don't attack us because we're Baptists or Methodists, or belong to this fraternity or that. They attack us because we're Black.
Indeed.
Brother Stanu, how would you say that the media plays a role in co-opting the term woke, and what's your perspective in terms of how now it's been basically almost I'd say probably now when people think of the term woke, they identify it with LGBTQ. What's your perspective on that?
Now, see, I hadn't really thought about, but in terms of the way that the media has allowed this to proliferate is by not challenging people when they use the term to define what it means, right? Or because when they do, it's what happens is exactly what Brother Asar was describing. The woman starts stuttering because he doesn't know, because she is just using it as a catch-all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that's one thing. And, I think, and then the other thing is to bring on, scholars of color that can really speak to the issue. And unfortunately, they tend to kind of rely on, these milquetoast Negroes who aren't going to really come out and vigorously defend. I mean, the real pathetic piece of this whole thing in Florida was when they basically held the college board hostage with this new African American advanced placement course and got them to go in and remove any references. Like I can't remember everything that they took out, but they took out some of the most conscious stuff, right? And so MSNBC, on two different shows, on Jonathan Capehart's show, and that's a whole nother story, and then on Simone Sanders' show, brought on Negroes from the College Board to defend that madness, and didn't bring on any scholars to refute the Negroes from the College Board who came on and defend. Oh, we had already decided to make the change. You a lie, right? You know, and you know, because you look at what they banned, right? Of course, they banned the 1619 Project, which, you know, has real issues in the first place, right? Because we know 1619 is just one date in, you know, a continuum, right? But then, you know, banning books about Rosa Parks, banning books about Roberto Clemente, banning books about Ruby Bridges. And with this most recent banning of the poem by that young sister, Amanda Gorman, it was one parent who complained to a school board that got that book dropped, and she didn't even know what she was talking about. She saw the foreword by Oprah and assumed Oprah had written the book, right? So it's just, first, it's ignorance, but what's even worse is that these school boards, these elected officials, are capitulating to one or two people who raise a complaint, right? And you know, which then begs the question, you know, where are our people? You know, I don't know what's happening in Florida, but I don't know where our people are pushing back against this madness, right? Because eventually they're going to come for the HBCUs in Florida, right?
Yep.
If black people don't stand up and beat this madness back, right?
Right, and that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show to bring it up. Now, the reason I brought up the media, you know, because I've been paying attention to what's been going on in the media, you know, particularly as it relates to movies and shows. And as you referenced, DeSantis in Florida has been one of the principal proponents to be attacking so-called the woke agenda, and one of his primary targets has been Disney, who owns, amongst other things, Marvel Studios. They own Lucasfilm, Pixar, and so on. And through how they've dealt with their focus on LGBTQ issues, infusing LGBTQ into children's programming, but at the same time doing some trying to bring forth awareness of some black issues. Take, for instance, the show Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where basically the Falcon, who was a black character, ended up taking over the mantle of Captain America. And it dealt with real issues. He talked about how the fact that he would have a hard time getting accepted as such, as Captain America, being a black man. And, you know, showed him and this other brother talking about being the victim of, you know, police violence and, you know, not being able to get jobs and employment or housing and things like that. Just basically showing the day-to-day struggle that black people go through. Now, of course, both of those things have been brought into the characterization of woke, whereas one is about really identifying the truth of what black people encounter and showing it for what it really is. But then also, where Black people are bringing to light hidden aspects of our history to show what we've done even in this country and in the diaspora. But but then they're aligning it with the LGBTQ and placing it all under the auspices of wokeness to give cover for the attack against Black people, right? And so that's how you make it nebulous. Your thoughts?
Well, we have to understand the psyops, psychological operations that are being waged against Black folks, okay? And when they conflate the LGBT community with anything regarding Black folks, our struggle, again, they're always going to use the psychological operations to redirect our energy to make sure that we're not self-determining and self-empowering within our journey. So, again, we talked about the Harlem Renaissance in the 30s and 40s. From that, when the civil rights movements, the Black Power movements of the 60s, they had COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program. Okay, so as the brother mentioned earlier, these operations, they're never dismantled, they just reinvent themselves. So currently, when you start talking about critical race theory, when you start talking about Black Lives Matter, they redesigned themselves, they being the FBI or the powers that be, because the FBI is just a military wing, the armed wing that they use to suppress us. It's now called Black identity extremists. So when you show love and express love from your form of Blackness, you're saying that we see that as a threat, okay? So they create these operations to distract us, redirect us from, again, us just being self-determining and self-empowering and where we're trying to get to, just inequality in this country, okay? So whatever we do, they're going to come in, give it a different label, because when we became woke in the 90s as it applies to the Afrocentric movement, and we now know that that was a COINTEL program, they siphoned off this information to allow us to say, well, it's going to be palliative as opposed to curative regarding them feeling empowered. So we became awakened through our connection with Africa. We start talking about Black power, Black consciousness. They say, oh, no. This is about multiculturalism. You have to include everybody. You have to include Asians. You have to include Latinos, just like they're doing with the Black Power movements of today. No, you got to be inclusive with the LGBT. We are so separate from their movement because everybody wants to jump on us because they see we're willing to take it to them, take it to the streets and say, we want to be free. So once we start making that claim, they'll get these other organizations, these other ethnic groups, these other subgroups, okay, and attach it to our movement. So it waters down what we're trying to do. So again, we have to understand what's being done to us from a psychoanalytical, psychosocial perspective, because they're holding on to the last vestiges of power that they have, because they will never allow us to own our identity, to own our narrative. They're going to do whatever they can do to keep us oppressed, and we need to recognize that, because we can no longer go from a religious perspective, like turn the other cheek, love thy brother. No, we've been trying that for years, and look what it's gotten us. So as Malcolm said, we need to do what we need to do, struggle for our freedom by any means necessary.
Absolutely. Brother Stenu, as Brother Asar was just bringing up the fact that the LGBTQ community has always tried to ride on our coattails as we've protested and asserted establishing rights for ourselves. And I recall back, when we were protesting back at KPFK, to restore, after they started taking off the African liberation programming that was on, that when we started our movements, then often I would notice the LGBTQ community trying to jump on our tails back then, to advocate for their positions, and and kind of like assuming, that we would be in support of them. You remember that?
Yeah. Well, I even remember being in opposition to, some of the leadership at KPFK who were, of African descent, but, were identifying more with the LGBTQ, their membership in the LGBTQ community. And yet they were trying to silence conscious voices at Pacifica. And, so they were trying to regulate, young folks say they were trying to regulate us. And I can just remember being at, remember how we would go to these Pacifica board meetings and call them out. And this one particular person who was in management at the station at the time was talking about, wanting to rein in, the Black community. And I asked her, why did she do that with her community, right? But she didn't have much to say about that. But, there's, I think pretty much every other group in this country has modeled their liberation struggles after hours, whether it be the Latino community, the Asian American community, the gay community, right? So that's nothing new. But yeah, it did. They definitely have tried to tie their coattails to Black liberation struggles when it's convenient for them, right? When it comes time for them to kind of stand up and take a stand for, like African-centered issues or things like that, then all of a sudden, they're nowhere to be found, or they want to, come up with an excuse to attack our movement. So yeah, it's definitely hypocritical.
Yeah. Can I just insert a quick point here?
Yeah.
So again, the brother made an excellent point, because I should always come to the forefront bringing that science. So when you talk about how when they see a direction that we're moving in specifically, they have to send another group in there to ride our coattails and to extract the energy in the direction that we're going in. Case in point, we referenced the COINTELPRO of the 60s. We are now referencing the Black identity extremists, but we got to go back to Bayard Rustin, okay? He was a part of the Ralph Abernathy, Andy Young, Martin Luther King, and Martin Luther King was always leery, because anytime they said Black civil rights, civil rights, civil rights, Bayard Rustin, who was a homosexual, was like, no, we have to include homosexual rights as well, gay rights as well. And they were terrified when they would go to different cities in the South, because they know that he had a propensity to seek out young white boys, young underage white boys, because that was his fetish. So as Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement and all the Civil Rights All-Stars were trying to get rights for Black folks, he would step in, okay, and say, no, we need to include the gays in this agenda as well. So every time we take an effort to say, well, we're going to do this for self-empowerment and self-determination, some group will come in and say, well, we need to be included in on that because we can't do it by ourselves, and we want to, again, like the brother referenced, follow your footsteps because we want power too. And if you get some power as Black folks, we want some of that power. So where it was Cesar Chavez and the farmers' rights, all of these movements, the Weather Underground, there were white people who were saying, we're being oppressed too. Then we had Gloria Steinem, Well, we have women's rights, okay? So anytime any kind of gratuities are offered, it's not us that end up benefiting from it. It's these other groups. Because once the power, the piece of the pie is divvied up and parceled out, we're always the last one at the table getting crumbs. Whether it's economic, politically, culturally, whatever the case may be, we're always at the end of the table getting the crumbs when everybody else gets a bigger piece of the pie, which is, again, a psychological operation to make sure that we never get our position on the chessboard. So when you have the strategic pieces that are moved, just go ahead. I'm sorry, because I can go on and go on and go on. So feel free.
No, and I was just going to emphasize the point that the convergence, or even the interference or the entwining of those different movements, and in particular the LGBTQ, I would suggest that, and I think you alluded to this, that the direction has been influenced and even pushed forth through the intelligence community to undermine the power of our movement and to basically water it down. And the effect of it is that when there's backlash, it provides cover for the expression, overt expression of racism, or actually covert expression of racism, because since they are in opposition with the objectives of the other groups, it provides a cover for them to be able to characterize all of it as woke, including the things that were initiated by us.
Check.
Brought up,
Well, you know what? There's this attempt to conflate everything that people are doing now to something that happened in our ancient past, right? And so just because we're engaging in some behavior right now, we must have been doing the same thing in the past, and there's no record to support that, right? You know.
Well, yeah, I mean, even like take for instance the backlash against the Disney's The Little Mermaid, right? And all that backlash is straight up racism, and it's being directed under the cover of wokeness, so as to prevent them from being outright accused of being racist. They just use the cover of wokeness as a shield. Now, the irony of it is that the original depictions of mermaids were all black. That is the origin of the mermaids, right? And so it was actually inaccurate for the Little Mermaid to be depicted as a European in the first place.
Anytime we project ourselves into these institutions, these established institutions, and Hollywood being one of the biggest, okay, because it is, I'll give an example. Idris Elba, because every 10 years or so, they want to reinvent James Bond, 007. So when the next go-around came around, Idris Elba, his name came up. The world went nuts. A black man is James Bond? It's like they go nuts when like, oh, black Santa Claus? No. Black Jesus? No. So anything that has blackness attached to it is going to send this European in a tizzy. They cannot handle them being in a secondary or tertiary position regarding whatever institution that we're referencing. There's so insecurity in their identity, anything that alludes to us having some sense of superiority, whether it's marginal or significant, they feel threatened by that.
Right. Whether or not it's true, right? You know, so
right.
I mean, we can I can have an issue myself with a black person playing James Bond when you understand what James Bond represents. You know, and that's the hegemony of the British government, right? And so I don't want a black James Bond representing, the British hegemony, you know. But as we all know, the ancient Egyptians are black.
I was just about to come to that, bro.
Right? And there's backlash, and that's also characterized under the cover of wokeness when we discuss the fact that the ancient Egyptians are black, and it is a well-known fact, even to the extent that there are quite a number of European scholars who have identified and acknowledged that as a fact. But, the wokeness is now, being used as a convenient cover to allow people to espouse, racist views, without sounding as overt.
Yeah, I mean, when you get this.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm sure you're making reference to, the recent tour that Zahi Hawass, the Arab head of Egyptian antiquities, who, is denying that the ancient Egyptians were African. And so, we've been, he came to LA, we confronted him here, we've confronted him in multiple cities across the United States, and I think when he finally got to New York, he's finally acknowledging, well, yes, so, there is some African, element to the Egyptians, so he's starting to push back. But I mean, Egypt banned my comedian Kevin Hart from speaking over there because of his referencing the blackness of the Egyptians, and there was some scholar from one of the European countries that they banned from coming for the same reason, right? So yeah, they're all out trying to uphold that white supremacy, because I mean, they cannot possibly be trying to say that the ancient Egyptians were Arabs, right? That, I mean, no evidence. And how do they deny when you look at those faces? It's absurd, sir.
Yeah. Well, they have to project their whiteness into the imagery. When you look at the movie Cleopatra, Elizabeth Taylor playing Cleopatra, okay? When you look at the Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston playing Moses. So they use Hollywood to confuse the actual ancient history of who actually dominated this planet. Who is the superior being? And I'm going to say superior being intellectually, physically, spiritually. We have always been superior. So they got to cast their spells through Hollywood to say, no. Even though all of the evidence, which is etched in the stones and the pyramids and the Medu Neter in the temples of Africa, no, who are you going to believe? Our narratives through Hollywood or your own lying eyes? So there's all kind of white scholars trying to come up and say, oh, no, the ancient Egyptians were white. It's evidence now showing that the original Europeans, and it is a lot of madness going on right now regarding the pushback with the movie, what's the Queen, Charlotte Sophia, the Queen of, oh my goodness, I can't remember the movie. Right. They have a black woman,
right,
playing Queen Charlotte. Okay,
right.
Now we know historically that Queen Charlotte was a Moorish queen. She was a black woman. Mm-hmm. So when they allow us to insert ourselves into this new imagery, white America, the white world goes nuts because they cannot tolerate not having themselves projected in their whiteness, because without their whiteness, they have no identity. Without no identity, they have no superiority. And they would rather commit suicide than acknowledge that they are less than, that they are not a superior being on this planet.
You know, it's interesting because I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico for a conference, and I had dinner with a friend of mine from graduate school. His wife is a biologist, has a PhD in biology, and she was telling me that she spoke with a genetic anthropologist, and her kind of way of talking about humanity and the race of humanity and this whole myth about race. She said, if you were to take all of humanity from the beginning of the first Australopithecine, right, the first hominid, right, said up to today and compress it into one 24-hour day, she said everyone would have been black up to 11:45 p.m., right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Meaning white folks would have only been on the planet, non-black folks would have only been on the planet for like 15 minutes, right? of a 24-hour day, right?
Right, and just as Brother Asara was alluding to the Moorishness of that particular queen,
Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
There's a book written by the European David McRitchie called Ancient and Modern Britons, which documents the fact that the indigenous people of that land was black. And so, I mean, you know that to be the truth, throughout the world. And when you go back into the antiquity of history, that the indigenous people of all lands all over the earth are black. And the revealing of that information is causing a serious backlash, even in particular the indigenous people of this country. Information coming about that is causing a serious black backlash. But the convenience of the co-option of the term woke, provides cover for the blatant and overt expression of racism. Now that you mentioned Kevin Hart, you guys complete on this topic and want to deal with the issue of the feminization of the black man?
Well, since you referenced his name and that whole push, he's one of the numerous entertainers that dressed up in a dress wig.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a dozen plus, from Wesley Snipes to Eddie Murphy to Martin Lawrence to, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So again, we have to understand the mesmerizing effect that Hollywood has on that feminization process, because again, through biological warfare, through social engineering, they have to limit our numbers. So the whole feminization process is inserting this whole, well, you don't have to identify as a male, you can identify whatever you choose to. That's part of this social engineering project that they got going on, because as it affects white people, they're willing to lose millions of their own as long as they get us in the process. So when you
I want to play a clip. Go ahead, brother. I'm going to play a clip.
No, I'm pretty much done.
Okay. This clip here. This clip is about brother Terence Howard, who recently expressed some frustration with the fact that black men have been feminized or are being pressured to be feminine in order to be able to have success. And he basically looks at it as essentially a rite of passage for black men to have success in Hollywood.
Terence Howard is speaking out on the alleged Hollywood agenda to make black men more feminine, and his comments have completely divided the internet.
You can't take the vertebrae out of your back just to fit inside of someone's ceiling. You have to stand up full and proud, stand up erect. You know what I mean?
There's a popular theory among fans and some celebs that the entertainment industry is deliberately portraying black men as weak and effeminate. People like Dave Chappelle and Cat Williams have previously claimed that black actors and comedians have to wear a dress on screen before they can make it big in Hollywood. And now Terrence is saying that if you really want to get to the top, you have to be effeminate because strong black men are seen as a threat. But is this a conspiracy theory or is Terrence onto something?
It's the stuff you've got to watch.
See, that's why you got to clear this stuff up.
You've got to watch the stuff that they put out there, because they're just trying to make
Terrence Howard has been a controversial figure whose personal life often overshadows his acting work. Terrence first drew public backlash in 2001 when he was arrested for a number of charges related to an attack on his first wife. And then in 2011, his second ex-wife, Michelle Gentz, filed for a restraining order accusing...
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. Now, you look how the sister first brings up the fact that the brother, with evidence,
Come on.
shows that it has been a clear pattern in Hollywood that men are forced to be effeminate or wear dresses in order to be able to achieve success in Hollywood. But then, and then points out the fact that Brother Terrence has come out strong in identifying that as a rite of passage within Hollywood. And then right after that, she goes into character assassination and to basically diminish the weight of his testimony. Right? Now,
Brother man, let me.
I
just want to enter into the record. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to enter this into the record because I had to look it up because I responded to somebody on one of the social media platforms. Here's a list of all of the black men in order to be allowed to practice their craft in Hollywood who were forced to wear or dress up in drag: Arsenio Hall, Brandon T. Jackson, Chris Tucker, Eddie Murphy, Flip Wilson, Jamie Foxx, Keenan Wayans, Martin Lawrence, Miguel Nunez, Sean and Marlon Wayans, Tracy Morgan, Vin Raines, Wesley Snipes, and the king of drag, Tyler Perry. So we have to understand that this mesmerizing effect of Hollywood, as far as the psychosocial programming that goes on, this is what they do to black men. If you're going to participate in our institution called entertainment, you have to surrender your masculinity, or else you will not be able to make a living with your craft. I just had to insert that for the record, bro, because this is a huge problem. And see, psychosocially, when our children see that, okay, that gives them permission to say, well, I'm going to identify as a little girl tomorrow. I'm going to identify something other than what I am biologically, because when they see this new fad, this new trend that Hollywood is perpetuating, that the educational system is perpetuating, it is confusing our children. Okay, so when a young male child goes through puberty, his programming changes. So from the ages of 0 to 8, it is the mother tongue that steers that young male child. But his programming flips. There's literally a biological switch that flips at age 8, between 8 and 10, okay, where he looks for the biological male voice, the bass, the vibratory rate in the male voice, for his next stage of who am I going to be and how I'm going to be within how I see myself. And then when he goes through puberty, there's another switch that gets flipped as far as how he sees himself within his masculinity. He has to find a male within his community and his family. So I need to understand what my manhood is going to be as I enter adulthood. And when they see this imagery in Hollywood, when they see this indoctrination in schools, it's confusing them psychosocially. This is an attack on us, hands down.
That was Brother Stanley.
Pardon my excitement, bro. Pardon.
Well, I would just call our attention to the fact that, BET, Black Entertainment Television, was up for sale, and there were several people that were trying to purchase it, one of them being Byron Allen. I forget, there might have even been another consortium associated with LeBron James, but you know who got the sale?
Tyler Perry.
Tyler Perry.
Yeah.
So you can expect, what can we expect now that Tyler Perry owns BET? He has his own production facility in Atlanta, right? And we see what kind of product he's been putting out up to now, right? So what does that mean for, the future of BET? Right?
Yeah.
Because you would think, because, Byron Allen got his issues, right? Sleeping with the enemy, all that. But at least he had a vision of a Black-owned media.
Yes.
That was going to, put productive images out there. BET has been trashed for years, right? And so now they're going to sell it to Tyler Perry, because I haven't seen anything socially redeeming that Tyler Perry's put out as of yet. I don't know if you know anybody else, but
It's bad.
Yeah, I don't think anybody on this call here would disagree with that at all.
When I reference certain talking points, I usually like to have the book, the author, the individual who's done the research, and I have not been able to find this brother's video. I saw it about 10 years ago, and he was an intern when MTV was doing its heyday, and he just had been sued by Rick James, Michael Jackson, because they refused to show Black videos on the MTV when they first premiered. So when Barry Gordy and some of the other high-profile Black entertainments were like, we're going to pull our entertainment value from you, they capitulated and allowed Michael Jackson's Thriller to be the first video to be shown on MTV. Having said that, they're like, okay, well, there's this huge source of money or revenue that we can have access to now that we've allowed them into the door. So they hired a series of young Black interns. Okay, and I apologize because I can't recall the brother's name and I cannot find the video because they've wiped it from the internet. He talked about when he would be leaving, they would be in a conference room, these white people at MTV, and they would be looking at different Black shows, trying to figure out what's the latest Black thing going on today. And from that, you got MTV, your MTV Raps. Okay. They didn't do it because, we want to be nice to Black folks. They saw a money-making opportunity, okay? So this brother ended up leaving MTV to be one of the program directors at BET. And he ran into the same problem because you had, Black videos, you had Donnie Simpson, and they recognized the frequency that Black music was perpetuating and how it's impacting us, because when we sing, when we create, it is always from a place of love, okay? So they had to go in there and dismantle that, just like Rockefeller, when he got control of medicine, when he got control of oil, when he got control of education, he also had to get control of entertainment. He changed the frequency in which music was being recorded, okay? So they know that when we are in control of our own destiny, okay, when we have the mother tongue, the father tongue, because it takes a village to raise a Black child, they got to go in there and dismantle whatever venue that is that's actually allowing that to take place.
Absolutely. Brother Stainer?
I don't think I have anything more to add because I think we were both talking about the whole BET piece, right? So.
Yeah. We brothers, we are now the elder statesmen in our community. We came together in the late 80s, early 90s, and this has been a 30-plus year journey of us fighting the system, okay? We're now the griots. We've had privy to all of the scholars from the from the 80s and 90s. A lot of them have transitioned, okay? But we retain their knowledge base. We've gone to their lectures. We've sat by side with them. We've broken bread with them. It is now up to us to fight this thing with every last breath that we have. Because if we don't do it, who else is going to stand up? So I appreciate you, Brother Farah, for having this platform, having this show, Brother Jamal, because we got to fight back on all levels. We got to do whatever we can do. We got to bring our science, bring our scope of practice so we can counter this toxic, genocidal narrative that's being imposed on us in our communities. What Brother Steve should say, what happens locally happens globally, happens nationally. So what they're doing in New York, what they're doing in South Central, what they're doing in East St. Louis, what they're doing in Mississippi, what they're doing in Florida, they're doing in Nigeria, they're doing it in New Zealand, they're doing it in Australia. What happens locally happens nationally, happens globally. This attack is global. They're trying to destroy the African diaspora.
So it begins with bringing the awareness to our people, because there's been some time, and I think there's kind of a gap in terms of knowledge. And so, whereas a lot of the things that we've been talking about is common knowledge to us,
right?
There's many who aren't aware of these type of things, and and so we talk about trying to figure out a solution, a cure for our malady, but we can't prescribe anything to the patient if they don't know that they're sick. So,
right.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of like the solution is part of the problem, right? Because so we have records now, recordings of our scholars from all those years. How do we make them? What's the platform that we're going to use to make this information available to the coming generations in a way that they can communicate in ways that they are familiar with communicating and that makes sense to them, and hearing it from people who they're open to hearing this kind of message from, right?
Yeah, that's part of the.
So we've got to use technology. So that's utilizing the technology. So we've got to bring some of the younger people into this process who have those technological skills and mentor them so that they can take this work to the next level,
Absolutely. I mean, we attempted that over a year ago when we were creating the incubator, and we always run into the problems that a lot of us suffer from. We don't have the venture capital to take it to the next level. And even though the technology, YouTube, the various social media platforms are available, it still takes a certain degree of revenue to really launch it and to organize it the way it needs to be done. So with all of this, all these millions of dollars, these millionaires, the LeBron James, the Shaquille O'Neals, I have been reaching out to them for years. They have handlers that keep brothers like us away from brothers like them. So I don't really have a answer for that or solution to that. I know we have the wherewithal, we have the knowledge base and the various sciences to do it. I just don't know how to get it out there. I mean, I'm working on my own individual project, and it's slowly creeping up because I've gotten hits on my little landing page of over 14,000 hits globally. But that still has not allowed me to monetize it to where I can get my science and my commitment to healing our people, our Black folks, to the level that it needs to be done, because they are working tirelessly every second of every minute of every day. They're figuring out new ways to impose genocide against us.
Well, part of it is really putting into practice some of the things that we've learned, particularly on the esoteric or metaphysical realm. So we'll talk about that once we get back together. Go ahead, Brother Stanley.
Even since the time that we started meeting during the pandemic, the technology has really advanced, particularly with this AI, right? And so I'm been working with this brother who is looking at, who's been kind of on the forefront of this AI work and has been looking at how do we take AI to make the animation to put, you know, When Black Men Rule the World out as an animated series, right? Or tell the story of Abu Bakr II in an animated version, or show, you know, Hannibal, you know, coming over the Alps with them elephants stomping on the Romans, right? In an animated form, right? So that, I think, is very promising.
Oh, absolutely. It can be
that's
done.
potential. Yeah.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
So we just have to, you know, put it out there to the universe, and, you know, the way we will reveal itself to us. I have a question, you know, from Dr. J, and he says, what about the mainstreaming of the trans community, let alone the rest of the alphabet? And the question is the promotion of these groups part of the population control agenda? Your thoughts?
Absolutely. From again, because I tend to look at everything through a psychoanalytical lens, through a psychosocial lens, and you know, XX plus XY, that's procreation. So if you're an XX trying to be a man, or if you're an XY trying to be a woman, you don't have the capability to procreate. That's part of the biological imperative that every species on this planet has. The biological imperative is to go forth, be fruitful, and multiply. So this alphabet agenda, they are counterintuitive to that whole process. Two men can't get together and procreate. Two women can't get together and procreate. It is biologically incorrect. Hope that answers the question, at least from my perspective.
Absolutely. Devastated.
Well, you know, on the one hand, you know, I don't think anybody should, you know, lose their life because of, you know, whatever choice that they've made in terms of how they choose to express themselves, right? So that's, you know, kind of basic, but, you know, it does seem, when you look at the fact that, you know, the number of people who are actually identified as transgender is such a small minority of the population, right? It just seems like something that is getting an overabundance of attention given the actual numbers, right? You know, everybody deserves to be treated fairly and equally, and nobody deserves, like I say, should die just because of who they are. But, you know, this is, you know, it's hard to, I mean, I think about situations where, you know, someone isn't being honest, they're being deceptive, and I think people, we've got to find a way for people to be very honest and open about who they are. And a person has a right. If I like, you know, if I'm attracted to women who are born biologically as women, and, you know, I'm very open and honest about that and very clear, then I think you have an obligation to tell me that, you know, if you weren't born a biological woman. So I have a right to make that choice, right? Don't, you know, I think what happens in a lot of these situations is like the crying game scenario, right? Where you find out at the moment of truth, right? That, wait a minute, whoa, right? And I think that's what's really causing a lot of these murders, right? Is that, you know, you've been deceptive, that wasn't what somebody was interested in, and all of a sudden, you know, bam, here it is, right? And brothers are like, no, hell no, that's not who I am. And, you know, their manhood is threatened and they react violently, right? So, I don't know. It's just a very complicated issue. And, you know.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's very
yes, very
complicated for
complicated.
the reason that you brought. And, and in that circumstance, even, as you pointed out, the, the male has the right to be able to decide, who he wants to choose to be with, being that, if he's more inclined to want to be with a biological woman and finds out to the contrary, see, I think he's in his right to be able to express that. But what's happening now is that male is being vilified and being accused of being transphobic.
Right.
Right.
Right. I think it's one thing if, you're going out to seek out somebody who is trans or gay so that you can physically assault them. Right. That's one thing. Right. But again, you're just out here trying to, live your life and have a relationship with someone, and you're being very honest about who you are, and all that. I would assume, right, that you would expect the same, right?
Absolutely. Well, and just as you said,
no. It's a little more deeper than that. I mean, if you pathologize this behavior, this social construct. I've been working in mental health outpatient clinics for a quarter of a century, and I'm going to tell you, brothers, if you listen closely, you can hear when that individual who chooses to identify other than what he or she was born as, they'll tell you when the trauma occurred that changed the trajectory of their psychological programming, okay? There's trauma behind 99.9% of all these individuals who are choosing to identify that, well, I'm not who I am based upon my biological identity. I choose to be something else. From a psychoanalytical perspective, that is trauma-based. And up until the DSM-4 was produced, which is the Bible for mental health professionals, it has every diagnosis known to man. And it's a money-making apparatus, but that's a conversation for another day. The DSM-5, the DSM-4, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Health Disorders, used to define people who chose to identify something other than what they were born as a mental health disorder called gender dysphoria. Okay. Now, if that's the lifestyle that you choose, as Brother Austin pointed out, live your life. Okay. But I've had to treat people who are stuck in that dilemma, that cognitive dissonance. Okay. And they struggle with it. When these individuals are having these surgeries, there's more suicidal impacts once they've taken the medical changes, the chemicals that go in and castrate them psychologically. They can't handle it because it goes against the biological programming which they came into this world under. They are suicidal, and their suicidal rate is astronomical. And one last point, if you are choosing to identify as what you were born as, and you choose not to accept them, like the brother outlined, they're saying that, oh, you're afraid of me, you're phobic. No, I just choose to live the biological agreement in which I came into this universe under. And they've got such momentum behind this narrative that we're not even allowed to say, no, I disagree with you. You can live your life, but you can't impose what you or how you see yourself as onto me. I do not have to accept that. And when you make that statement, when you take that position, the attack comes at you from all directions. I'm telling you, from a mental health perspective, working in mental health clinics, I've been attacked on so many different occasions because the language changes constantly. Well, okay, what are they identifying as today? You can't keep up with the alphabet. And if you choose not to identify the them, they, him, her, she, he, you can lose your job. That's how much power and authority that they have.
That's right, bro. It's serious, man. It is real. Somebody will lodge a complaint against you if you use the wrong pronoun. You got to be on your P's and Q's.
I've been written up.
Right? You'll be on your P's and Q's. You got to, and so now every time, like this time, I'm at a conference. Now I have to put my gender, my pronouns of choice on my badge, right? Yeah.
God.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know,
So again, this is just another apparatus. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, bro.
I was going to say, and what's interesting is that, you know, as both of you have pointed out, that if one chooses to adopt that lifestyle or go ahead and take the action to do the sex change, that is a choice, and people should be allowed to make their choices and be respected for their decision, right? But that should go both ways, right? But nowadays it seems like that's only one direction, that we are to respect their decision, but they can't respect our decision to be hetero.
Mm-hmm.
Double check.
To engage with a partner who identifies, if we're a male, who identifies as a biological female, or is not identifies as, but is a biological female.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
let me give you brothers an example. This was some years ago. So I'm working at a clinic here in Pasadena, okay, and we used to call them the brigade because they run in cliques, they run in packs. It was a series of males who identified as gay, okay, and again, I'm in a profession of the helping people business, and they would always say, they would literally try to push your buttons, and like, well, brother, you gay, you still know you gay, you just haven't ran across the right one of us. Mm-hmm. And if you let the right one of us get you, you'll be gay before you even know it. Mm-hmm. So when I challenged him because it was insulting to me, this individual went to my director and said that I was being hostile towards him when I wouldn't agree or allow him to project his lifestyle choice, his gender decision onto me. That was some years ago. It has become, they have gained a voting bloc, a power position within the political and social narrative, that they have the strongest narrative out there. It supersedes Latin rights, Asian rights, and particularly black rights. Because anytime you say black rights, they're going to say, oh, no, alphabet rights, LGBTQ, and whatever new letters they're adding, because they add one every month. So you're not allowed to have your cultural identity, your racial identity, your ethnic identity, without them saying, no, you need to bring them along with you. No, we don't. And when you say no, that's when the attack begins.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you, they're hostile. My last stint, the last outpatient clinic I worked for was in Hollywood, California. Oh, my God. I'm not going to get into the grimy details, but
and all things being equal, that scenario that you just explained would have been characterized as sexual harassment.
Exactly. Because they have their own facility regarding homelessness and mental health services. They have their own facility. This building is 5 stories tall and takes up 2 city blocks, specifically to deal with their agenda. You got AIDS Minority Center. You got all these agencies that are propping up to deal specifically with their needs. So we're talking millions and millions of dollars in funding. But ask us, hey, well, what are you doing to counter the homelessness in Skid Row for black people? 73% of the homeless population in Skid Row is black. Do they have specific needs for us in that particular targeted subgroup? No. But identify as something other than what you were born as. Oh, they rolled out the red carpet for you.
Absolutely. So
I just wanted to give it to you from a mental health perspective. So.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, the point to this is, for us, we have to be self-determinative in terms of looking out for the interests of us as black people. And we cannot allow our efforts for self-determination to be co-opted, derailed, misdirected, by allowing other people to co-opt and, ride on the coattails of our movement, and then, try to basically take them over in the same way that the Black Lives Matter movement was taken over and redirected, when the impetus for that was the killing of young black, or just black men, period. And that ended up being taken over and co-opted by the LGBTQ community. So, we have to be vigilant, and that's why we bring these things to the forefront by talking about it here on the show, just to bring into the awareness is that any attempts at self-determination, that this is the playbook to derail our movement and to allow others to be able to advance based upon the sweat and blood and work that we've put in order to bring liberation to our own people. So, we have to be, ever vigilant. So I appreciate you brothers coming on, to discuss these things. So we need to bring these things to the forefront so that we can go about our business of liberating our people.
Absolutely. Brother man, thank you for the invitation, and whenever you need me, give me a holler, and I'll suit up, and show up.
All right, brother. Appreciate it. Appreciate it being on with such deep thinkers.
Hey, we're the next stage of scholarly brothers, man. It's up to us, because if we don't do it, nobody else will.
That's right. Arms up for the Bogart.
Bowls up. Bowls up.
All right. Peace.
Take
All
care,
right,
y'all.
brothers.
Peace.
Okay. So we thank our brothers, Brother Asar and Brother Stanu for joining. And, that's an ongoing journey that we have to do to be able to ascend as individuals. We have to be aware of what we're up against. To ascend as people, we have to understand, what we're up against. And it's important for us to be able to realize that the battle goes on within ourselves, but the inner battle is also affected by what's going on outside of ourselves. And so it's always important for us to be able to maintain awareness, because that outer external battle is always going on. And if we're not aware and mindful, we can find ourselves being derailed and distracted. Right? And so it's important for us to be ever vigilant and aware. So I hope you found this to be enlightening and insightful. And, we'll continue to do more of these things in the future. But, we're also going to spend some time, going into some practical things that we can do in order to be able to expand our consciousness and be able to, tap into our inner self and, to try to, bring some unity amongst our people. And, at some point, I'm going to end up having to do something on the relationship front too. So, be looking out for that. So with that, I greet you in the Hermetic words of peace, Hotep, and we'll see you next time here on Journey in the South.